Hey everyone, and welcome to the Skylines Academy session, where we are going to focus on an absolutely fantastic topic today, which is DevOps and how we demystify that. And it feels like, in the past few months, there's just been a massive resurgence in this topic, especially from infrastructure teams. We've got a lot of people that train on Azure, maybe came from the infrastructure background, maybe VMware background, maybe dabbled in a bit of automation, but are really trying to understand how to make this transition. So with that said, I am super excited to welcome two absolutely fantastic people today. For those that may not know them, we have Shannon Kuehn and Donovan Brown, who will be helping us to untangle the mysteries of DevOps today. First of all, let me introduce Shannon Kuehn, who will be assisting me today. Many of you may know Shannon from her absolutely fantastic AZ400 certification course designed to help those getting started in DevOps. And I've known Shannon for a number of years now and absolutely love Shannon's passion for technology. But rather than me, completely talk about you, Shannon, I'll let you introduce yourself, and if you could be so kind as to introduce Donovan as well.
Sure, thanks. So I'm Shannon Kuehn. I'm a cloud advocate at Microsoft, and my whole goal is to try and reach out and talk to broader communities, get them excited about Azure and tech all up, and kind of be that awesome feedback loop for engineering. And then we are joined by Donovan Brown, who is also a cloud advocate. So I'll let Donovan speak a little bit about his background.
So my name is Donovan Brown. I've been at Microsoft, I think, about 7 years now. And if you look up the definition of DevOps at Microsoft, that was me. Because before I became an advocate, I was actually on the Azure DevOps product team. And I was a PM for DevOps, which is kind of weird because it's not just one thing. And what I had to do was work across all of our teams on Azure DevOps and figure out how do we get that better end-to-end story that we could give for our customers. And now I run a team of advocates, and one of which is Shannon.
Yes. So thanks for joining us, Donovan. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Okay, fantastic. So with that, we'll get started here. And Donovan, ready to kick things off. I think you've got a lot of background there, which will help people. And how would you define DevOps in general? Just as somebody who's brand new to the concept, no familiarity with DevOps whatsoever. How do you, tell them what it is?
It's funny. It's great. So I was asked this question when I joined the product group. And I didn't just blurt out an answer or go and search for someone else's. What I first did is reflected over my own career. And after doing that, because I've been writing software for, my goodness, since '96, I started at Compact Computers. And back then there wasn't a word called DevOps. Like we didn't talk about this thing called DevOps. And the first thing I asked myself is, why are we talking about this thing called DevOps, and what is it here to solve? And after doing some soul searching and thinking about my own career, I came up with a single sentence that I think frames the goal of it, which is DevOps is the union of people, process, and products to enable continuous delivery of value to our end users. That's the goal. Continuous delivery of value. It's not software. It's not features. It's value. And I think what was so important about the word value is that operations teams can deliver value with no help from the developers. And the developers can deliver value with no help from the operations people. But when they work together, you're delivering value continuously. So I didn't want to focus on software. I wanted to focus on value. And I think that's the most important part there.
Yeah, I think that part you mentioned, just the union of people, process, technology, all these areas. I think, that sometimes gets missed a lot. I think a lot of people focus on the tool set sometimes and forget there's a whole, principles of DevOps to follow as well. So yeah, it's super.
Because the products and the tools, that's the easy part. Like you can go and buy a CI/CD system or get one for free and set that up. That does not mean you're really yielding all the benefits of implementing DevOps properly, because if your operations teams and your dev teams don't work well together, you're really not, you've automated some stuff great, so you might be moving faster, but the product that you're producing is no good. Like crap shipped fast is still crap. You just don't want to rush it out the door. You want to engineer better, you want to design better, and that requires having the operations teams and the developers collaborate together, because I need to know what the constraints are on my infrastructure. That might actually guide my design and the architecture. But if I don't know that and I make all these assumptions of how great the world will be, And then I go and I code that way, and then I give you this code. And now you and I are in an argument. What do you mean I can't have an M series machine? I expected 12 gigabytes of everything, right? And 5,500 CPUs. What are you talking about? Like, well, if I would have known that, I would have designed it differently. Well, if you had asked me, you would have known that, right? But we wouldn't talk to each other. So to me, it's all about giving them also a common goal. What I've noticed is when I visit a lot of customers, and I do this often, and the first thing they say is, Donovan, our ops teams and our dev teams, they don't like each other. Like, what do you mean they don't like each other? Like, they bicker and argue all the time. Like, that's interesting. Why don't you talk to me about how you incentivize both your teams? And they'll say, okay, great, this is easy, Donovan. We just tell the developers, innovate, add features, ship as fast as you possibly can. Like, okay, I kind of get that. Talk to me about how you incentivize your operations teams. It's all about uptime, green lights, stability, and reliability. Like, it's interesting because the easiest way to keep a stable server stable is to not touch it, right? Once the lights are green and it's running like clockwork, don't touch it and it'll keep doing that. And then you just told this other team, attack the servers and change them as much as you possibly can. And I'm going to give you a big bonus. So you've told these teams work against each other. Right. So what I tell them is give them a common goal. That common goal should be value. I'm going to tell the operations team and the development team the exact same thing. For you to get the big bonus and the recognition, I need you to deliver value and prove that you delivered value. And to do that, they have to work together. They have to start collecting telemetry. They have to start showing me numbers before and after a change, after a deployment. And when they do that, they magically start to work together. So give them a common goal, which is value in the definition, and a lot of magical things just happen automatically.
So I would think it's more of like a philosophy then. I think folks get stuck on DevOps as a technology, and it's really not. It's more of a philosophy.
Yeah, I would think of a methodology, philosophy.
That works too.
It just changes the way that you do business because it's not just go install this product X. It's not just go and start doing continuous integration or continuous delivery. It's changing the way that you think about delivering software. Change the way you think about provisioning hardware, like provisioning resources. Like, I do not want to send an email to someone that ends up in someone's inbox that then goes to the Azure portal and then clicks around and then emails me back the IP address of my server and the username and password to log in so I can RDP. That is not DevOps at all. What I want to do is say, hey, look, I'm going to be running inside of a VM at some point when this is all done. I'm going to need IIS installed, .NET Framework. It's okay, great. What we're going to do, Donovan, is we're going to build this infrastructure as code file, right? This file that defines the infrastructure upon which you want to run your application. We'll do it jointly together. And when you're ready to ship your software, it's going to be checked into source control right alongside your program. And when we push the button, it's going to rush through the pipeline alongside your program, and they'll be able to provision that infrastructure for you. And that opens up so many possibilities for you. Not only is it faster, because I'm not waiting, because trust me, that email takes 30 days before I get a response from that email, right? And that 30 days, exactly. And that 30 days, that email 30 days from now says, okay, it'll be 30 days before I can do this for you, right? So I'm like 60 days out, right? It took me forever to even get a response. And the response was like, there's more waiting to be done. But when I break down the barriers, I get infrastructure as code in place. I can have that VM as soon as I'm ready to ship my software because it's going to be in the repository. And it brings up disaster recovery becomes easier when you start doing things like infrastructure as code. Whenever we had a disaster, it was all hands on decks. Everyone's pages or phones are going off. Everyone comes to the war room. I'm ordering Chinese food. We're starting to this is done, right? And we're going to sit here until this is done. And we're all fighting fires and we're trying to figure out what's going on. It's horrible. And I've been doing demos recently, and Abel works for me. He's a DevOps guy as well. And our goal was, I want to be able to start from nothing, and within 20 minutes have my entire infrastructure, app, and everything deployed. So there's a demo that you can find on YouTube that I've done where I'm walking through a failure. And then I realized that this isn't just a failure. This is a catastrophic disaster, because by the time I get to the Azure portal, I show you that my Azure portal is completely empty. There's not a single resource group in it. And that's the worst possible place you could be, is that someone accidentally ran a script that deleted everything. I would normally quit my job, right? That would be the end of it. I'd go on to LinkedIn and start trying to respond to all those people who've been offering me jobs for the last 2 weeks. But what I do on stage instead is I push this button. I start to explain to them that I do infrastructure as code, that I have CI/CD enabled, that I have a team that understands how important it is to have high quality code ready to ship. And then I go back to my Azure portal and you'll start to see resources just start popping up. And then you see the Kubernetes cluster get provisioned and the service comes up. And what we do is really cool is that we actually query Kubernetes for the IP address of the server and then call out to GoDaddy as part of our pipeline and update the DNS record to point at the new IP address that we just got. So there is no human intervention that goes from, oh my God, we've lost everything, to, wow, go back to the URL and everything's working again, right? That's the holy grail. That takes dev and ops working together to get to that. It's awesome.
I like that. Well, so then if you're thinking about this, right, we've discussed that DevOps is a methodology, philosophy, whatever buzzword you want to use to describe it. If somebody were to come to you, and maybe it's a customer, maybe it's somebody in the broader community, and they're trying to understand the difference between Azure DevOps and DevOps, do you have any sort of fun like story or like analogy that you use to try and explain this?
Yeah, the first thing I do is I apologize that Microsoft is the worst at naming products on the planet. That's the first thing I do is like I say I'm sorry, because I used to get on stage and beat my chest. You cannot buy DevOps. You cannot buy DevOps. It's not a product. And then all of a sudden, a year later, we name our product Azure DevOps. And everyone on Twitter that could remember that was pinging me, making fun of me on that. Like, you still can't buy it. That's just a really poorly named product, but you cannot buy DevOps. It's the people, it's the process, and the tooling and technology that comes together that gets you this holy grail, this DevOps utopia. So I tell them that's just a poorly named product. That gives you CI/CD. It also gives you work item tracking. It's a brilliant product, just a bad name.
Right.
That's all it is.
And then do you talk a little bit about the tool itself, or do you just make that line of delineation? This is
because the product, again, it's the easy part. And I honestly don't care if you use Azure DevOps or GitHub Actions or
Jenkins,
GitLab or AppBear or Circle CI or Jenkins. Name your favorite CI/CD system. That's not the important part, right? We got to focus on our customer, and our customer doesn't care if you're using Jenkins.
Right.
They care if you're delivering innovation, if you're delivering value on a continuous basis. So what I try to do is up-level the conversation to, let's talk about the concepts and the best practices. You can go and do the comparison between your favorite CI/CD systems and determine which one you're going to use, but that's not what's important right now. Your people have to believe that this is not a nice to have. Implementing DevOps isn't an option right now. I am a firm believer that you either implement DevOps or you lose. It's that simple, because your competitors are already doing this. And working at Microsoft, I have this very unique perspective, because I'll go and speak to some of our customers and they're all excited that I'm there and I'm preaching a good sermon, and I can see them lighten up like, man, we have an advantage. Then I have to tell them the hard truth that you have to realize that I work for Microsoft, which means all of your competitors are also our customers. And I've already spoken to them, right? So like, you're behind right now. You're the last airline that I'm speaking to, or you're the last retailer that I'm speaking to. You have no idea how many of your competitors I've already spoken to and are well ahead of you in this race. So you got to stop waiting. You should have implemented DevOps yesterday. That's when you should have done it. Don't plan to do it 6 months from now. You should have done it yesterday, because all the major innovators are doing that. You don't want to be the next Blockbuster. You don't want to be the next Barnes & Noble. You don't want to be the next, you know what I mean? Like, you don't want to be the next Blockbuster. And they had an opportunity to buy Netflix. Like, they tried to sell themselves to these people, and their people didn't get it, right? Look at another example is look at Xerox. What they did at Park, they basically invented everything that we're using right now, but they were so focused on copiers that they gave away the GUI, they gave away the mouse, they gave away Ethernet, they gave all that stuff away because their people did not get it. Their people are the most important thing that have to understand that DevOps is going to make you, if you implement it, it's going to make you the next Netflix. If you don't, they're going to make you the next Blockbuster. It's your choice.
Yeah. So that's actually a good tagline.
You either implement it or you lose. I've said that for a long time, and there's too many examples. Skype killed the telephone. Netflix killed the freaking Blockbuster. Amazon killed the bookstore.
Right.
Yeah. All people who were born in the cloud, who were thinking about that, who were delivering value continuously. Netflix, they've deployed a production constantly, like multiple times a day. GitHub's the same way. They deploy straight to production. There's no breaks, no friction into taking an idea and putting it into our hands of our users. And it's DevOps that enabled that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, one thing that comes up a lot on that point too is infrastructure as code is clearly a piece of DevOps here. And let's say you're someone been doing some infrastructure work for a while. Perhaps you're a developer and you're used to writing code and you don't really know much about the infrastructure as code portion. How would you go about explaining that to them? I'd say, and even like people that maybe think, hey, I do a lot of scripting and PowerShell today. Like, what's the difference for them? Sometimes people think, hey, I've automated all this stuff, but how do I get into infrastructure as code, and what kind of makes it that? I guess.
Great. So infrastructure automation is not the same as infrastructure as code. Infrastructure automation is you writing a script that if I run it, will then go off and stand up a VM. But if I've already run it, don't run it again, because then it's going to crash because it doesn't expect that VM to be there. That is automating your infrastructure. That's great. I mean, and that's progress. It's better than you going into the portal and doing it.
Right.
Infrastructure code is idempotent, which means that if everything is the way it's supposed to be and I run my script, it's a no-op. Nothing happens. If the things are not the way they're supposed to be, this script will then fix them. The cool thing about that is I can run the script 1,000,000 times in a row and no bad things are going to happen. Either it's going to make sure everything is the way it should be, or it's going to put things the way they should be. And if there are, then no harm, no foul, which makes it really easy to put into your DevOps pipeline. Because you just run your pipeline again. There's no if statements, there's no conditions, there's no, well, if this is true, then nope, just let the script do what it's supposed to do. So infrastructure as code is taking scripting automation to a point to where I can just run it blindly over and over again. I can implement it inside of my CI/CD pipeline, and it's going to make sure that the infrastructure is correct. Another thing I love about infrastructure as code is it understands the desired state. Not just that I need a VM, but that I need IIS installed in that VM with port 80 open and .NET Framework 4.7 on that VM. And if anyone were to change any of those attributes of that particular server, which they do because I know better, so I jumped into the VM and I RDP'd into it and I uninstalled this thing that I don't think we need. And that's a needle in a haystack, because if everything was working great, and all of a sudden everything's not working great and you don't know what changed, everyone thinks it's the software, we're blaming the infrastructure, we have no log saying who changed what, and we're panicking. Infrastructure code, I would just run my pipeline again. And it would say, oh, that's funny, this port's supposed to be open, it's not, let me open that port back for you, and then boom, your application is up and running again. And I wasn't always a believer of infrastructure as code. It took me a while to come to this realization as a developer, because I'm a developer. For me, the infrastructure never moved very much. Like, why am I wasting time writing these scripts when my infrastructure has looked the same way since the first time I deployed my software? Like, this does not move very often. Why are we wasting time here? And it was me not seeing the cloud is going to change this for you, Donovan, drastically. These environments are going to be changing very rapidly. And when you embrace the power of infrastructure as code, you can now have these environments that just disappear, and that's okay. And matter of fact, that's what you expect them to do. You don't need a dev environment and a QA environment if you're not actually deving and you're not running QA tests. Why do you have these environments completely provision either a huge operating expense if you're running in the cloud, right, and you're having all these resources running for nothing, or a capital expense when you bought all these physical servers to be your QA environment and they don't run half the time? But in the cloud, and you embrace infrastructure as code, I can spin up a dev environment, deploy all my software there, run a series of smoke tests to make sure everything works, and then literally destroy that entire environment, stop paying for it, and then go over, provision the QA environment, give access to all my QA people, let them run whatever test they want to, and as soon as they say this is ready for production, ship it to production and destroy the entire QA environment. And all of a sudden, we're not wasting money anymore. And if I need a QA environment, and Shannon needs a QA environment, and Nick needs a QA environment, fine, spin 3 of them up. And when you're done with them, we'll tear them all back down again. The flexibility that infrastructure code gives you is amazing, even if you're not talking disaster recovery, which I think is the best part of it. Is this disaster recovery for me is just a deployment. It's no longer a big deal. Just deploy the code again, and everyone go back to sleep and relax. In 10 minutes, everything will be back up just the way it's supposed to. And what was really cool is that I did that demo, and then Abel Wang saw it and said, "Ooh, I think I can do some more stuff there." He took it and started backing up his database to another Azure subscription, and then wrote into his pipeline, if I'm forced to restore and I test the database and it's empty, go grab the latest database backup and then restore it into that database. So his even took a step further than mine, because mine, you would lose some data. His, you didn't even lose much data at all, because it was awesome, right? And we were just
really cool.
Kept pushing it further and further and further. So I understand why people focus on the tooling, because it's fun and it's geeky and you can make it do whatever you want. But you can't lose fact of you need a really good process. You need people to believe in that process. The 3 of them have to come together, or it just doesn't work.
Yeah, and on that point of just, back to like adopting, I think you've highlighted well kind of the differences there. I talk to a lot of people that are kind of getting into Azure for the first time, and something I always try to tell them is like, immediately as you deploy services, just immediately learn to do them as code, from the very beginning. Is that the right way? Is there a better way? How else do people learn? Like some people are really fearful of it. Like, I'm not a developer. I'm used to going to the portal. I was in VMware before. I would go into vSphere at vCenter, right? How do they, what advice have you got for them just learning like the scariness of it, right?
Perfect. No, that's a perfectly valid question. And what's really neat about the Azure portal in particular is that it will walk you through all the questions that you need to. And then when you get to the last one that says, okay, I'm going to click this button that says create, you look to the left or the right of, I can't remember where it is now, there's a button that says, would you like to see how you could do this from the command line? And you click that button, and there's the script that you need. So you can kind of cheat, and it's like, okay, I'm going to go through and configure everything because I don't know all the JSON formats. I don't know all the different things I have to do. So I'm just going to go through the portal, and before I create it, I'm going to say, give me the actual script you would have run, and then I can take that script and put it in source control and then run that script 100 times in a row if I want to. We'll even parameterize it for you because you're going to want the server to have a different name, or you might want to adjust the scale of the devices that you're dealing with, bigger or smaller for different environments. So I think one of the cool things about getting started is you can use the portal, but you don't have to use it to deploy your infrastructure. You're kind of using it to build the scripts that you want. Not to mention the tooling for ARM is getting better. ARM is for the Azure Resource Manager templates. It's a JSON file. It's just a mountain of JSON. And but what's really cool about it is it's idempotent. So I can use this script, I can give it to CI/CD systems, I can use it from the command line, and it'll provision my environment, and I can run it again, and it'll make sure that everything is okay. And we can actually generate those for you from the Azure portal. So you can use the portal where you're familiar, but quickly get comfortable with the Azure CLI, which again, I'm like everybody else. Just because I like DevOps doesn't mean I like change any more than anyone else. And when the Azure CLI came out, I'm like, but I already know Azure PowerShell. Like, why am I going to go over here and learn this stuff? The Azure CLI is brilliant. Like, it's really, really nice, clean. It's a different syntax than different metaphor than PowerShell. They both work very similarly, but I've come to really like the Azure CLI. It's very concise, it's very clean, and it's also idempotent, which means the scripts I write using that, I can run a million times in a row and they won't damage anything that's up there. But what's really cool, again, is that you can take your portal, use that to understand what it is I need to create, and then export out all these valuable scripts or ARM templates that you can then integrate inside your source control and inside of your CI/CD system. So use the portal. That's my short answer.
Yeah, that's great.
So if someone buys into the notion of DevOps, right? You have a conversation with them, this gels, and they want to bring it to their company, right? Maybe they go to a tech conference, they see you speak, they see Abel speak, they're amped up, they're excited, they come back to the company and they try to implement it as a practice, but they encounter resistance. What advice would you give those folks who are sort of sitting in the trenches, so to speak? They're not making the business decisions, but they potentially have influence. Have you ever had that conversation come up when you've talked to folks in the broader community?
Yeah, I'm gonna get comfortable because this is a hot topic for me. This is like a button for me. And there's another video you can find where I just lay into this poor person, and I didn't mean it, but it drove me nuts. But he asked a very similar question. So I was somewhere in Europe, I just finished this big DevOps talk. The gentleman raises his hand and says, "How am I supposed to get permission to do this?" I'm like, "Permission? It's your job to do this." Like, I don't understand. Like, that to me was such a bizarre question for you to ask me. How am I supposed to get permission to go do this? It's your job to go do this. And then later, after I laid into this guy for a while on like, go do your job, it dawned on me because he said, no, I got to stop what I'm doing, go learn all this stuff about DevOps. It could take me weeks or months to do, which means I'm no longer shipping software. I got to go get buy-in and permission to take that time off and then come back and implement DevOps in this one fell swoop. I'm like, oh, okay, I understand why you're asking now. Don't do that. Don't go in and try to implement everything at once, because as you pointed out, you don't know what you don't know, and all the research that you do is going to lead you down one path, which chances are is not going to be the path that you need, because your app's going to be slightly different than the app that you read about, and the template doesn't quite work, and then you're going to waste all this time, not deliver value, and then fail on DevOps, and you're never going to get permission to do that again. So don't do that. What I would tell you to do, if you're all amped up on DevOps and you want to go back and start implementing it, just start implementing it piece by piece. Don't do it all at once. If you do not have continuous integration on your builds, that's the first thing that I would go back in and figure out how to do. And don't tell anyone you're going to do it, because you don't have to tell anyone you're going to go do it. Because let's say, for example, the 4 of us are on a team today, and we're already committing to a GitHub repository, but we do not have continuous integration enabled. I, as Donovan Brown, could choose to implement continuous integration, and the other 3 of you would have no idea that I did it. So why do I have to ask permission to not interrupt or stop you? And to use a product for free. I'm going to take 15 minutes out of my lunch. So I'm not even going to take away from the 8 hours I'm getting paid for. I'm going to take 15 minutes out of my lunch, and I'm going to go look up Azure DevOps or GitHub Actions and figure out if I can set up a CI system. And I, as Donovan Brown, am going to have immediate benefit from that. Because if you do not have continuous integration, what I'm about to say is a fact, and I don't even have to know you. At some point, someone else on your team checked in code that was broken, You pulled that code down and you were broken all day until that person fixed the code. It's called breaking the build. We used to have lights that would go off. People would have to bring in donuts and apologize to the entire team because it happened so often. We had rituals and rules around breaking the build. But when you start to implement continuous integration, the server that's running that build is the person who lets everyone on the team know the build is broken. Do not get the latest. Donovan has to go fix it because Donovan's the person who broke it. I'll bring in the donuts, I'll fix the build, but no one on my team has been impeded. No one on my team stopped working because they all knew, don't go get the latest, keep working on your local copy that works. When Donovan fixes the build, I'll let you know when it's safe, and then everyone can pull down the latest versions of the code and keep working together. It gives you instant feedback, instant value for your investment, and you didn't have to ask anyone's permission to do it. Then what I would do after I have continuous integration running, I try to figure out how to get my unit test running inside of there if they're not. If I don't have unit tests, I start writing unit tests, right? Because that's what I should be doing because that's my job. And then I figure out how to get that inside of my CI system. Again, do not go and try to convince someone who has no idea how to write software, has no idea what a unit test is. Can I go and write unit tests now? Because all they're going to see is, isn't that going to take more time? No, we got hard deadlines. Well, those deadlines you think we're going to make, we're going to miss the next ones when I'm fixing the bugs that I'm writing right now that I don't have unit tests to go off and tell me that I've already written. So all you're doing is delaying the cost, but you're going to have to pay that price. That's called technical debt. And what I tell people is stop trying to convince people who don't know what unit tests are that you need to be writing unit tests. All they ever ask you is, when will you be done? Give them a legitimate answer, but include in that estimate time for you to go write the unit test, time for you to do your job, and then start delivering higher quality code. And eventually you're going to be moving faster than you've ever moved before because you can refactor with reckless abandon because you have these tests that will tell you if you messed up or not. I've been refactoring code for the last week here. And the only reason I've done it is because I have like almost 1,000 tests that run against the code. And I know if I make one slight mistake, the test will tell me, Donovan, you need to go back and fix this because you've now broken what everyone expects. I would never touch this code if I didn't have those tests. I'd be so afraid I would break something and not know about it. But I don't ask permission to go do this. That is your job. So if you're amped up about DevOps and you want to go back and you want to do this stuff, what I would encourage you to do is find the thing that hurts the most. That one thing that hurts the most. Because no matter if you're automated or not, you have a process. There is a way that you get requirements. It might be email, it might be an Excel spreadsheet, but you have a process that says, here is the thing I'm supposed to do. I go and I do it, and somehow it makes its way into production. That is your current process. It might not be automated, it might be fully manual, but that is your process. And if you look at that process, and everyone has one, there's one point in that process where you start to feel anxious. If something bad is going to happen, it's going to happen right here because this is the part where it always freaking messes up. And what I would tell you to do is focus on that one area. 15 minutes a day out of your own lunch, go do some research and figure out how can I make this one painful, scary part of our pipeline easier. And then I would focus on that, make that easier, and then take a step back and say, okay, now that I fixed that, let's look at this pipeline now, this process now. What hurts the most today since I fixed that yesterday? I would spend 15 minutes a day focusing on that one thing. You do not have to ask permission to get 15 minutes of your day to go do something that's going to better the entire organization. So I think that's what I would tell people is don't go ask for permission. Just do the right thing. And you know what that is. And don't try to convince people who don't know what that is that it's the right thing to do.
Right. I like that bit of advice.
Yeah. Let me ask you from another angle, right? So what, I've seen this at some Fortune 500 companies I've worked with where somebody on the app side or the infrastructure side is trying to bring DevOps in or trying to learn about it. And it's actually a reverse of that. They're saying, we've got a DevOps team that does all that. The DevOps team does the pipeline. The infrastructure guy is trying to automate. He's like, no, I've got to go talk to DevOps when I want to automate my infrastructure. What do you, I guess the question there is like, as a political entity, DevOps and some of the things that are happening, what have you seen in enterprises that are running into this, where it becomes another ivory tower of DevOps or something?
And in many companies, what it is yet another silo, right? You've actually made the problem worse if everyone has to go, because you used to have a dev team that would or would not talk to your ops team, and they were completely separate. And instead of bringing them together, you put another team in the middle.
Yeah.
Right. So you potentially made the problem worse. Now, and I remember again, I was talking to a customer and I was talking to the DevOps team, and they saw me kind of like sulk and sigh, and they're like, no, Donovan. Our goal is to actually like teach ourselves out of a job. He says, what I'm hoping is that the 5 of us eventually end up in other teams, and there is no such thing. But right now, we have no one who's actually making decisions or guiding us. Like they're like, no, we get it. We understand how this could be
They're
bad.
evangelizing it, helping spread.
Exactly. They're basically the center of excellence for all these different Scrum teams who are trying now to implement DevOps as well. And they're sharing their expertise. They're looking for patterns that they can then share across other teams. Is that eventually, Donovan, we hope to just disband ourselves into the teams that we're actually mentoring right now. But we do not intend to be this barrier between dev and ops, just making the situation worse, not better. So I would just tell people, be very cautious when you build a DevOps team. Every agile team should basically grow into a DevOps team.
Yeah, what's its goals? What are your purpose, right? I mean, I think on that point, I worked with a large airline company. Maybe it was the same one. Who knows? That we went to, but they had a great process. I remember that there was sort of a DevOps group, but their goal was to help teams learn the tools, the pipelines, the infrastructure as code tools, and it was to your point, this airline was more successful than another one I visited, right? They were helping, they were moving so much more quickly, so it was incredible.
Yeah, because even inside of Microsoft, we have these like center of excellences, right? Like we have, for example, on the Azure DevOps team, there's about 50 feature teams, so 50 Scrum teams all come together to build this one thing that's called Azure DevOps. Now you can imagine if we didn't have some type of control over the API, we could have 50 different versions of APIs. Each one team writes an API slightly different than the other. They're not using the exact same verbs for different types of actions. They're using puts for one reason, and the other one's using posts. And it'd just be horrible for me as a consumer of that API to have 50 different APIs that I have to deal with. So what we have is we have this architecture team that basically owns and defines how all of these APIs are going to be written across all 50 teams. Same is true for the user interface. You can't have 50 different people all deciding what the user interface should look like, because it would look like a hot mess. Right. And you don't, I remember when I was working on a team and we didn't have a designer at one point, I could look at a screen of our webpage and tell you exactly what developer wrote it. If it was all radio buttons, that was John. If it was all checkboxes, that was Richard. Richard loves checkboxes. John loves radio buttons. And Susan just loves drop down. So if I looked at the screen, I can tell you exactly who wrote it. And then we finally hired a graphic designer and said, make our site look good. And then she took on the responsibility of, if it is an X, it will always be a checkbox. If it is 3 or more options, it will always be a drop down. Like, she had these rules. And it was really cool is it freed our developers from that nonsense. It's like, no, like, don't focus on that. I need you as a developer to make the button work. I don't need you to care about what the button looks like. That is someone else's responsibility to make it pretty and intuitive and all that kind of stuff. That's for someone else to do now. And when you freed them of those responsibilities, it just got better. And that's just, I think you can apply that kind of concept over and over again. And DevOps could be kind of like that. They're kind of like this. We're going to have the best practices. We're going to disseminate all this great information. We're going to help you be successful, but we're not going to be blockers. We're only going to be enablers to making sure that you collaborate really, really well.
Very cool.
That's awesome. Any other, good advice for somebody getting started? Where else can they learn more? I know we've got like some, Shannon's course and fantastic, we've got a Terraform course that's free for people, but, Microsoft's putting out a ton these days on MS Learner.
Yeah, just go to docs.com. Yeah, docs.com. Most people don't know that. You can just type in the word docs.com and you'll hit our landing page for all of our docs. And Azure DevOps, the product is in there. But there's also a lot of great just DevOps in generic context, like conceptual DevOps. There's also some great documentaries of how the Azure DevOps team does DevOps, because they use Azure DevOps to build Azure DevOps, which is kind of this awesome inception kind of thing, which is awesome. We also have different teams inside of Microsoft on their own digital transformation, so you can learn how Xbox does it, how Bing does it, how Windows and Office do it, because they're all at different stages of this transformation. And you're going to see that inside of your own organization as well. Some of your teams that are greenfield and born in the cloud and thinking about cloud first from the day one are going to be able to move a lot faster than some of the teams that are on the legacy fat client WPF trying to make it more webby kind of stuff. It's going to be harder for them. And that's okay that your organizations are at different stages of maturity, because it depends on the product and what the product is actually trying to do. But I am also a firm believer that you can do DevOps on anything. And I don't think that it has to be some cloud-based product to use DevOps. And I said, I can do DevOps for anything. And I remember someone tweeted at me, well, I still do VB6. I was like, oh man, I'm so sorry for you, but I can still help you, watch. So I went and I wrote this blog post and I literally set up a CI/CD system for VB6, which was like unbelievable that I could get that to work. Because the hardest part was installing VB6, because it crashes like crazy and it has that weird service pack and it's not supported on 64-bit. But there's ways that you can make it work. And once I got VB6 installed, the concepts of DevOps applied. right?
Yeah.
Continuous integration, better source control, small branches, like all that stuff still made sense. And I was able to deliver value more quickly, even if it's a VB6 application that's going to have an MSI at the end versus a website deployed into a web server.
That's
Very cool.
fantastic.
Yeah, docs.
Any other questions from your side for Donovan, or any other tips from your end? I know you've just gone through and created the intro course for those getting going. Any other thoughts?
I think this all rings true. I think, talking to folks in the community, DevOps seems to be the tool, and that's never been the case. And Donovan hit on all of that. And I think he's answered every question I could have thought of, at least the stuff I hear from students. So I can't think of anything else.
Yeah,
the only other thing I would share is that's come up a lot when I talk about DevOps is the adoption rate of devs versus ops. And devs do it pretty naturally because there's concepts like continuous integration, which we've been doing since I worked at Compact. Source control, which I've been doing since the day I started writing software. Continuous delivery is relatively new, but we knew we were trying to automate deployments. When I go and I speak to operations teams, many of them don't use source control. Never have, right? They do script, and they keep those scripts either on a share or on a thumb drive, but they don't use source control. They know what continuous integration is because obviously the dev team's doing it, but they're not integrated into it. They're not involved in that particular process. So I've noticed that a lot of operations people that I meet sometimes are very anxious about talking about DevOps because they think what we're trying to do is get rid of them or automate them out of a job. And I just want to say very clearly that is not the point of DevOps. What DevOps is here to do is make sure that you're well integrated and we can start doing things like infrastructure as code. And you are going to have to learn what source control is. You are going to have to learn what infrastructure as code is, but don't be afraid of that because by learning that just makes you more valuable to us. It's the ops people who refuse to adopt are the ones who are actually probably at risk, not those who realize that the shape and the responsibilities of my job are going to change slightly. But we still need ops people, right? DevOps, I am a firm believer because I have no idea how many layers there are in a network as a developer, don't want to know. I don't know how to configure a F5 load balancer, don't want to know, right? All I want to know is that the stuff I need will be there when I need it. And this is the app I'm writing. Tell me what infrastructure that I need. And let's write the infrastructure code for that. So by no means am I trying to get rid of operations people by implementing any of these techniques or practices inside of a DevOps pipeline. I still need you. I still need you geeking out over the stuff you geek out over because I don't get it, don't want to get it. Just like you don't want to have to know what an if statement, while statement, or for statement is. You don't want to, I get it. Right? Like we're weird in different ways, but I need you to be weird in your way for me for a long, long time because I need to make sure that our application is running as efficient as it can. Not to mention new types of resources come out inside of Azure, new types of way of configuring them, new architectures for our infrastructure. All that stuff I need someone to handle. So I just wanted to make sure we're very clear that DevOps is not about taking one of these jobs away. It's about making sure that these two roles, which we need, continue to work better together.
Yeah, I like that message. Actually, I was going to talk about one thing because I'm that person, right? The infrastructure person that has changed into more of a developer. And I have had all sorts of questions, right? Because you read the documentation, you go through some of the training, and you still have questions. So it's a matter of really breaking down those silos and finding a trusted dev who can explain it to you like you're six. That has been so invaluable. And like learning source control, right? So in my demos, I chose to use text files and Harry Potter characters because you don't need them to be any more complex than that to understand the whole flow of source control. And that was a recommendation from a dev friend of mine. I would have been so stuck with source control otherwise. So
yeah, exactly. And I love that. And trust me, there will be no shortage of developers who will want to talk to you about development. We'll talk your ear off about it if you want to. So if you want to know about how to branching and spell, oh my God, like all day long. So and we all want to succeed. Again, if we have that joint goal of value, like we're going to work together, and I'm going to try to enable our operations teams to be as efficient as they can because that I now have a vested interest in you being successful too, because your success is my success. We succeed as a team now, not dev versus ops, which is what it's been for a long, long time. It's now dev ops because we need each other to be successful. So yeah, I mean, I've learned more about infrastructure than I ever thought I would learn. Learning about ARM templates and helping with the Terraform files or whatever it is that we're trying to develop. I know more about infrastructure, which makes me a better developer because I can now utilize that technology better than I was before. I was just in my own little world, assuming everything's going to be one particular way. And then I realized, wow, like there's so many other options. If I would have known I had this available to me, I would have done so much other cooler stuff. So I like the fact that it's forcing both of us
Yeah.
to see the world through the other person's eyes, and it opens up a whole world of possibilities for both of us.
Completely agree.
Awesome.
Well, it's fantastic. I think DevOps as a philosophy for sure. And I think this is fantastic, Donovan and
Oh, my
Shannon.
pleasure.
Thank you so much. I think this is
Yeah.
really going to help people demystify DevOps. Super excited to continue this series. And so for everybody kind of tuning in, thank you very much. All the links will be in the description in the YouTube channel and video here. So Donovan will get all those links to blog articles and videos, and Shannon, all your links there as well. We'll get those in. So if anybody's looking
Perfect.
for more information, it'll be there. And stay tuned for more of these. And again, Donovan, Shannon, thank you so much. This has been brilliant.
Yeah.
Oh,
Thanks,
thank you for
thanks
having me.
Donovan. Yeah.
Perfect.